It's great to be here during London Tech Week, an event that I've been looking forward to ever since being appointed almost 6 months to the day as a Science Minister back last December. And it's even more exciting for me now, as was mentioned in the introduction, because my usual brief, which covers science, innovation, higher education, also agri-tech, amongst many other topics, has now been joined with the energy and clean growth portfolio, and I'm covering while Minister Claire Perry takes a leave of absence. And out of all these things, I think they fit together very well and in a very real and important way. Just under a year ago, the government received the landmark report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change on the impact of global warming of 1.5 degrees. A report which provided the clearest picture of yet the catastrophic impacts of rising global temperatures, and you don't need me to tell you all as experts of the consequences of this, and obviously the prominent media presence that this has been given in recent weeks and months. The government immediately sought the advice of the Committee for Climate Change, asking what we needed to do to accelerate our own decarbonisation and how we could make this benefit both bill payers and businesses alike. And we received the committee's response in May. The report is comprehensive and authoritative, and the advice is clear. Limiting climate change is indeed achievable, but it will take tremendous effort across all sectors of the economy in every corner of the country to meet those goals. And a huge surge of innovation to ensure that we can continue to prosper through what will be a difficult transition. Now, recently, as Minister for Research and Innovation, I see the government's commitment to 2.4% of GDP, both public and private, being spent by 2027 as an absolute priority. And so I've been making a series of speeches. I'll be making the third in London Tech Week on Thursday, looking at how we invest in emerging new technologies such as quantum. But this increase is absolutely critical. We're putting in £2.5 billion already into our efforts to decarbonise across the board, giving us that opportunity to be at the cutting edge of technologies for the future. And this morning, I've just come back. I've driven down and driven back up to Bristol, where I've been there for the launch of the Advanced Automotive Propulsion Centre. New technologies that are needed in order to ensure that we can produce reliable, clean electric vehicle technology for the future. Now, many people say we're in the early years of a so-called fourth industrial revolution, a change that's going to be just, and needs to be, just as profound as the birth of the steam age and mass production, or the dawning of the digital age. My colleague, the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Michael Gove, I'm probably actually crossing over his leadership bid campaign at the moment. I'm not quite sure what's happening on Twitter, but as he's rightly identified that we're entering into a new agricultural revolution too, and how we use our land will have to change, just as everything else will. Now, farmers know this all too well, having been on the front line last summer when temperatures were extraordinarily high and food production became particularly challenging. And it might be this understanding that's inspired our agricultural sectors to embrace innovation, whether that's exploring vertical farming to reduce waste and preserve our soil, using AI to monitor the relationship between bees and their environment to keep both in better health, adopting precision agricultural techniques to improve crop yields and fertilizer use. We've even begun to use robots to plant, to grow, and indeed to harvest crops, as successfully trialled by Harper Adams University with its hands-free hectare project, which has established, rightly so, global interest. And I think this gives us a glimpse into how we'll be producing food in the future. These are crucial developments, and each can make a major contribution to reducing our carbon footprint. But today I wanted to focus on another area where I believe we can see real change, and that's energy. Of course, now you don't have to look very hard to see that already. Over the years, there's been massive amounts of change in the sector. Go back 50 years or so and you'd find the landscape unrecognisable. Literally so. For anyone who can remember the smog and soot of the mid-20th century, certainly not me, but I'm sure there might be a few in the audience. In fact, 100 years ago, and just a few metres away from where we are today, the coal drops, which are now being converted into a retail quarter, which would have been filled with piles and piles of pitch black coal delivered from South Yorkshire and dispersed into London by narrowboat and horse-drawn cart. Quite literally, we can see the architect of that old world around us as we build a new one around us. And it's not just the fuel that's changed. Back in the 1960s and 1970s, electricity was provided by your local electricity board, and that was about all you knew. If more energy was required, someone would phone someone, who in turn would phone somebody else, until somebody in a power station tasked with increasing the flow of coal would throw that into the furnace. Coal was king, while solar power and offshore wind were considered curiosities, a historical throwback from the medieval period, or even fantasies, if they were considered at all. But today, the story is entirely different. In the 1970s and 80s, and even into the 1990s, to power our nation, we burn through 70 million tonnes of coal each year. Yet just last week, we saw for the first time an 18-day run of coal-free days. I was particularly excited as Interim Minister, endlessly tweeting while the going was good and it was carrying on. But there's something we've not seen since the dawning of the first industrial revolution. It's something rightly that we should celebrate. Celebrate, but certainly not rest at all on our laurels. This morning, none of our power so far has been generated by coal. I think it's gone on for about 12, maybe 13 hours now. You can follow on coal_UK, I think, to find out. And that certainly was the situation at 1 o'clock. But now that's real testament to our flourishing renewable sector. In 2010, we had just under 10 gigawatts of renewable electricity. At the end of last year, we'd more than quadrupled that. And last quarter, 54% of electricity generation was from low carbon sources. And on the 14th of May this year, a quarter of our power came from solar. And these are the best results we've ever seen so far. In the wider green economy, we're employing some 400,000 people in green jobs, and we're aiming to see that increase as many to 2 million over the next decade. And these are jobs throughout the country. So in Hull, Siemens Gamesco have employed over 1,000 people at their turbine blade factory. And in the Isle of Wight, MHI Vestas have installed a new blade mould in their factory, creating 1,100 jobs and adding more than 40 million to the local economy. While Forley, the same company that's turned a decommissioned oil-fired power plant into the state-of-the-art painting and logistics facility for their 80-metre turbine blades. And in places like Grimsby and Barrow-in-Furness, people are seeing the new economic benefits of new investment in operations and maintenance facilities for offshore wind. The offshore wind sector deal, which was launched on the 7th of March, has committed to looking at the technologies of the future, working across the R&D sector and institutions, which will provide the UK with significant export opportunities, including digital and robotic technologies for the surveying and operations and maintenance, and the next generation technologies contributing to cost reduction and to grid integration. So we're not only decarbonising, we're also crucially diversifying, bringing these new technologies in alongside natural gas and nuclear to modernise our approach to energy. And at the same time, we're building flexibility and reliability into new digitised, decentralised systems through the rollout of smart meters and the deployment of technologies such as batteries and smart appliances, as outlined in our smart systems and flexibility plan. We're already seeing a more generation located closer to people's homes and an increase in electricity energy demand as electric vehicles begin to take off, coupled with a huge passion for climate-conscious policies and green products amongst the British people. Our citizens want to do the right thing and to be trusted also to make their own decisions, and that's exactly what this government wants to see. Crucial to this effort is empowering both individuals and businesses to take control of their own energy use, something that people have the means to do in order to do what works for them and are rewarded for their efforts. So today, I'm especially pleased to announce our new plan to develop small-scale, low-carbon electricity generation here in the UK. Supplier-led and subsidy-free, we're calling it the Smart Export Guarantee, or SEG for short. And legislation has actually been laid in Parliament just this afternoon, meaning it will be implemented before this year is done. At its most basic, the SEG is a guarantee that those homes and businesses that supply their own low-carbon electricity, whether through solar panels on the roof, for example, or an anaerobic digestion plant on a farm. For the first time, they will have the chance to sell their excess electricity to the grid through a market mechanism. They will be known as exporters. Most electricity suppliers, any with more than 150,000 UK customers, and that covers over 90% of all supply, will be required to offer at least one export tariff, which will be the means through which this low-carbon electricity is bought and sold. The precise details of the tariff, such as the length and level, will be for the suppliers to determine, but there are a few core conditions, not least that exporters must be paid for what they produce, even when market prices are negative. And we expect to see these suppliers bidding competitively for electricity to give exporters their best market price, while providing the local grid with more clean, green energy. Indeed, since we first consulted on the SEG, we are seeing some great signs that the market's ready to gear up to rise to this new challenge, with some suppliers like Bulb and Octopus offering or trialling exports to small-scale generators. And as the Secretary of State has set out previously, it's now time to move away from deployment through subsidy, paid for through a levy on bills, towards a more market-based approach. And this will benefit consumers and will spur the sector to take advantage of innovation in technology and the processes to reduce costs. This is in line with our industrial strategy, and our aim is to enable the small-scale, low-carbon generation sector to fairly access the wider energy market and deliver clean, smart, flexible power. And this will extend the benefits of a smarter energy system more widely, which will aid ambitions to further reduce emissions. And perhaps most exciting of all, the SEG will benefit from an overlap with other parts of low-carbon transition, from electric vehicles to home storage and smart tariffs. A key motivation of the SEG is for enhancing the role that generators can play in driving forward a smart energy system using smart meters and time use of tariffs, which will allow more consumers to benefit from flexible electricity prices. Under the previous feed-in tariff scheme, FIT, exported electricity was largely unmeasured. That meant that sort of flowing back into the grid without metering. Under the SEG, all exports will now be metered, supporting the rollout of smart meters and ensuring compatibility with the rise in use of both electric vehicles and storage batteries. So imagine in the home of the future, customers could generate solar panel power, use that power to charge their car and go for a drive. Then when they came home, they can sell the power left in their battery back to the grid at a time of peak demand. So getting a better price for them while taking some of the load burden off the national generation. And all of this will mean there's never been a better time to be an innovative, low-carbon products and services to be able to bring those to market. With this legislation, we will ensure that we'll achieve the smart, green, flexible future that we all want to see. This is, of course, an evolving field, one that is welcoming to any business or individual that is ready and willing to develop new ideas and new technology. And I often say to any young person I speak to, whether I'm wearing my university's minister's hat or my science minister goggles, great ideas can come from anywhere. That's why talking to all of you and engaging in London Tech Week, I'm about to head off to a roundtable at Tech Nation shortly. I'm pleased to announce also the winners of our Energy Entrepreneurs Fund. Since first running in 2012, the EEF has been one of the pillars of our energy innovation programme. So far, it's supported around 133 projects, leading to more than 300 new jobs being created, more than 100 patents being filed, and more than £100 million of private sector investment. And I'm delighted to say that we're maintaining this excellent record with today's announcement of the 19 winners of Phase 7 of the fund. These winners, whose details we've published today online, will be receiving a share of £8 million to support the development of their technologies in energy efficiency, power generation and storage, technologies which, of course, will be essential to the SEG and to that home of the future. Now, maybe it's because I'm coming to this portfolio with a fairly fresh set of eyes, but it's been a revelation for me to see the terrific progress we're making, and one of the many, many reasons that I'm particularly optimistic about green growth for this country. As I said at the beginning of my speech, I know that we're all facing a massive huge challenge. There is a climate emergency taking place, and I've seen a tremendous level of engagement from businesses and individuals throughout the UK. And as much as I know the enthusiasm is there, I want to make sure it spreads to every single person and every single region of this country. It's one of the reasons that we as a government are also so keen to host COP26, which of course we're negotiating at the moment. And of course there are other countries that have a great story to tell and have every right to host that UN conference. But I think what we're doing here, what we're attempting to do, is truly exceptional and setting a precedent for the rest of the world to follow, just as when we set those first carbon budgets as part of the Climate Change Act, the rest of the world looked up and began to follow. And after the success of Green GB Week, I have no doubt that we would do an excellent job with COP. But that, of course, is something for the future. We hope to hear whether we've been successful with our bid by the end of the month. But for the time being, I'm delighted that this smart export guarantee has come finally to market. And I'm excited to see the difference that it's going to make in years ahead. There are benefits for this for consumers, opportunities for the sector and for small businesses and spin-outs, and its suppliers too. We've seen the energy landscape change over the centuries, and I think we're about to see it change for the better. A cleaner, leaner system with the British people at its heart, with innovation and tech, crucially, at its nerve centre, is on its way. So I hope you'll take that optimism with you into the rest of this week, and I want to thank you all for listening today. Thank you. Right. Good luck with the rest of it.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just going to check that my other speakers are here. Just hold on one second. It's fine. Everybody is where they're meant to be. I suddenly thought I hadn't seen them for 15 minutes. Right, we're going to. You have been lured here for a talk about AI-griculture, where we're going to be talking about food efficiency and agri-tech. So let's go and drill down to that, maybe plant some new ideas into it. This discussion is going to be led by Abel Glencross, who is farmer at Pale Green Dot and Duchess Farms, a chef and co-founder of the Sustainable Food Story. Abel.
So we're going to talk today about technology and AI in agriculture and the food chain. And I've got a great panel here today. And it's probably better if they introduce themselves, because I'll probably slaughter their job titles and what they do. So do you want to start?
Yeah, so John Abel, I'm from Oracle. I'm the Vice President of Cloud and Technology. Don't worry, you haven't gone to the wrong place. I'm going to talk about bees today.
I'm Sarra. I'm from Sustainable Farming Robotics Company, small robot company.
And I'm Mander, Griffiths, Head of Value Chain Sustainability for Nestle's businesses in the UK and Ireland.
Cool. So maybe, Sarra, should we start with you? Because that seems like almost the most obvious use of technology in agriculture is what you guys do. So do you want to explain a little bit about what you do and how it's linked to AI?
Yes, so fundamentally what we're doing is taking robotics and artificial intelligence and applying them to farming to make it much more efficient and sustainable. So we're in particularly looking at using small robots instead of big tractors for various aspects of field work. So the robots will feed, seed and weed arable crops autonomously with minimal waste. So the precision is really impressive. It can cut chemical usage by up to 95% and emissions by 90%.
And then that's Tom, Dick and Harry.
Tom, Dick and Harry.
Tom, Dick and Harry.
Yes.
Amazing.
With their boss, Wilma, who's our artificial intelligence system.
Amazing. And so how does technology come into bees, John?
So what we're doing at the moment is we're working with the WellBee project. And the WellBee project is basically about gathering data from hives around the world and then bringing them together as a central data source to allow scientists to work out what the pollinators are doing. 1/3 of our food source comes from pollination through, and the honeybee is one of the most prolific ones. And one of the things we're trying to work out is using weight, sound, and also just the eco-environment of the bee, using different layers of data in how they operate, because the more successful pollinators are, the more successful our food chain is.
Nice. And then that brings me nicely to you, Andy. How are you guys using technology within your supply chain?
Yeah, so I guess for us, the food sector is critically exposed to the impacts of climate change. So it's in our interest to find effective ways of working across the entire value chain, particularly with our farmers and with land managers. And technology has a range of different roles to play. In some cases, it's very direct. in terms of precision agriculture, but it's also important to consider the enabling aspects as well. So, for example, we co-developed or are working with Airbus and Earthworm on Starling, which uses satellite information, both optical and radar, and consolidates that to help us understand deforestation and where the risks of deforestation are, and then we can take real tangible action in terms of helping to manage that with the relevant authorities and with the farmers themselves.
And I suppose I'd like to get all of your ideas on sort of small and large scale agriculture, because you kind of work in different areas of it. So Nestle's pretty big, and I looked up when I was looking into your background a bit about Nestle. The first thing that came up was why Nestle is the most hated company in the world. And so it'd be interesting to see, you say about deforestation and and empowering suppliers. So it'd be quite interesting to know how your view is on large-scale agriculture versus small, or how do you guys choose, or are you using technology to empower these farmers or to mitigate stuff that you're doing that's probably a little bit naff?
So we work right across the range in terms of both some very large farmers, but actually the vast majority of our work is with small farmers, family farmers, and that could be whether it be coffee, whether it be cocoa. And it's about finding ways in which we can support them to develop their own business. So we put a lot of effort into agricultural assessment and helping them to understand where their priority risks are, and then helping them to understand what the right technologies are to apply. And again, from a delivery perspective, actually, usually the technologies are really simple, really straightforward. So it's just about getting the right application in the right place. Again, for us, the key is using technology as the enabler, so helping to understand where those priority areas are, helping to understand what the right kind of interventions will be. And as an example, one of the key things we've done in the UK is co-develop what's called the Landscape Enterprise Network model. And that's really a proposition where, rather than looking at a particular spatial area and then saying, right, this is a solution, let's try and get business to invest, which can always be difficult, you start from the other end. So you start to say, well, what are the primary business interests in a specific location? And then once you understand that, start to build up the proposition. So you aggregate that interest, and then you aggregate up the supply, and then working with the farmers, they can deliver interventions which not only supply the commodities, the products that businesses are interested in, but supply the ecosystem services which these businesses are incredibly reliant on. And once you start to do that, the opportunity for shared interest investment at real scale to make a real difference is massive. But the big challenge is, if you're going to do it, there isn't a silver bullet. It's about getting the right interventions in the right place. There's masses of data out there, but the challenge is it's all in different formats, it's all owned by different people, the granularity is different, and the confidence in that data is also very different. So finding a way of trying to pull all that together to both help identify what the baseline situation is, but also then being able to use it to model what the different interventions' impact may be and how we can drive real regenerative agriculture is really the crux. And that, for me, is why I'm here today. Hopefully we'll have a few organisations here who think they can help on that journey to make a real tangible difference to the landscapes in which we operate.
I suppose that again comes back to you guys. So Sarra, with your technology, have you seen that more small-scale farmers use it, larger-scale farmers, and again, what happens to the data that they collect?
Yes, so robotics is applicable for all sizes of farm. We've got a group of 20 farmers that we're working with on farm to develop the technology, including Waitrose and the National Trust, but also some much smaller family-sized farms, everything from conventional to organic. So it's really, we're really trying to work hard to work with farmers to identify a solution to their actual problems that they're facing. It's really threefold: yield, profit and environment. About 85% of UK farms are not viable without subsidies, and the subsidy model is shifting. So that really was, I guess, the initial impetus. Well, co-founder Sam is a farmer, and he was like, I need to do something to sort this. But there are much longer-term future potential of the kind of technology we're talking about. I think the really exciting thing is how artificial intelligence is just set to change farming forever. We're talking about a shift away from monoculture towards permaculture. Instead of having to treat the whole field at the same time as a whole, farming by averages, we can start to think about each individual plant as a data point, each square metre of soil. So it's a much more precise and efficient approach, and really longer term, this is like looking into the crystal ball, we can start to apply a horticultural approach to gardening. So, if I'm walking around my garden, I'm not going to, say, oh, there's a dandelion, I'm just going to spray the whole garden, carpet bomb it, and, that's what the approach to weeding that has to be done at the moment. There is great work being done to develop more precise systems, but fundamentally the whole field has to be done at once. So with this technology, you can map exactly where the weeds are, take the robot out and just zap each weed individually using electricity like a mini lightning strike. You can see a fungal infection like septoria 2 weeks before the human eye can identify it, so you can get to it without having to do a preemptive application. So that really greatly reduces the use of chemicals. And you can potentially also be starting to apply, strip tilling, strips of wildflowers for biodiversity in the field, and potentially planting different crops alongside each other, harvesting them at different times, and really moving away from that monoculture approach that we've got at the moment.
Economically viable for farmers to do it that way, or is it something? Cause I don't know if anyone heard of chameleon. There's a chameleon weeder where it uses cameras, which is amazing, but you have to have the infrastructure and sort of the economy to buy that in the first place.
Yeah, so that's the first thing, of course, that every farmer will ask. So the very first thing we did was do some financial modelling with Anderson's farm business consultants, and when they looked at the model of our robotics, they calculated it would be a 60% reduction in costs and a 40% increase in revenue. So yes, definitely economical.
And so how does technology come into bees? Because bees have kind of come to the limelight recently, which has been amazing. But
yeah, I suppose, obviously I'm not a beekeeper, but I now know more about bees than I ever did before, was that the interesting thing is actually when we started the project, we first of all captured standard data, which is like, could be humidity of the hive, telling us the temperature, could be the weight of the hive. Now we're doing sound artificial intelligence, so we've taken the sound of the bees. Not only that tells us when they're going to swarm, so we can get predictable models. And the thing about AI, the form that we're using, and I don't know how many we're all going to talk AI. So I'm going to talk a very specific type of AI, which is machine learning. How many people in the audience know what machine learning means? Stick up your hand if you do. Oh, this is scary. So there's a lot of tech people in the room. So I'm going to make it really simple for the other hands that didn't go up. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find the needle in the haystack, but see in the whole haystack. And the needle we're looking for is specific to how the bees are working. And if you're aware, if you are a beekeeper, I'm going to make this really quite simple, and I apologise, is the bees work as a team. There's 30 to 60,000 bees in a hive. Every bee has its own job and its own approach. So what we can do is we can work out sound different. The sounds, the microphones we use are quite specific. They can tell the difference between a bee and an Asian hornet. We can also put cameras on the front of the hive to actually detect how many bees are coming in and out. And also we can tell if it's a wasp coming in or out, or if it's Asian hornet. Why is this important? There's predators to bees, and obviously in the UK we don't have a massive amount of Asian hornets. And there's actually a really good story about something we found out, which is you can go on YouTube, look this up, Asian hornet killed by bees. If you've got young children, do not let them watch it. Basically, the bee has a higher heat, so it can actually cook an Asian hornet. So what it does is, as it goes in there, we can tell through our sensors that the bee is under attack, because an Asian hornet will go in and mark its own territory to put sensors out there to go back and tell the rest of its gang to come back to this specific point. What a bee will do is one bee will attack it. That bee will be the fat sacrificial bee. Then a whole load of bees will jump on top of that Asian hornet. If you go on YouTube, you can see this, and then they will cook it. And literally they can outright cook it. We can tell the temperature, the weight, the sound, so we can identify acts like that. But more importantly, the UK and other countries have got a huge amount of open data, and I don't think farmers use enough of this, which is, in the UK today, there's about 600 forms of open data. Pollution, could be mapping data, it could be bus routes, the blue cameras that you see on the motorway where it does the amount of people in traffic jams. All of this has an impact on the pollinators, that total landscape. So we load up all of those data lenses, so wherever a hive is, we can then start seeing all of the geographical references to the hive. And a bee can go up to 2 kilometres away from the hive to find food source or water, and then we can plot how that ecosystem is working really well. So that's what we're sort of up to. It's not a classical sort of just sensors to a specific hive. We're trying to create a network here with the Well-Bee project. So basically every bee hive in the UK could be connected. So there's no boundary of connection.
Cool. And does everyone know what bees and pollinators actually do? I don't know if anyone wants to put their hands up, if anyone knows exactly. Maybe we could explain a bit more why bees are important.
Yeah, so if you look at today, most people feel that airborne pollination is the way we get our food source today. But actually, pollinators, and there's a number of pollinators, there's good and bad. What the idea is that any bee, let's talk specifically about the honeybee. There's also the bumblebee, which most people will know in their garden. The best way to explain it is, if you've got a fruit tree in your garden, I've got quite a few apple trees in my garden, that when you have a really good crop or a really bad crop, it will be the pollinator that will probably be the differentiator. Because what they will do is they will go around collecting the nectar for the hive, but also taking from plant to plant and actually passing pollination across, which is critical for the food source we have on any flower-based food source. So for us, tracking how good they're performing is critical. And one of the ones that we're working with at the moment is there's a plethora of new housing going up in the UK, and as you probably know, we're building a lot of houses at the moment, is a construction company now could use a beehive to work out the biodiversity, and specifically the biodiversity they're creating once the houses have actually been built. So the bad side of houses, if you're into the bad side, but the good side of it is we can now create eco-environments around it to make sure that it's a sustainable biodiversity, because biodiversity is the most critical element, allowing because obviously one of the things we talked about before was a green field is typically less biodiverse than an inner city. So it's things like this we can tell from the pollinator. There's one other side effect with the bees, which is quite good. They're very predictable on weather. And I only found this out recently. A beehive, within 2 days, will be very accurate on the weather system in your area. So one of the things we can start doing is plotting a really good prediction on the weather, which is important for farmers and others. And we can get it within 2 days of accuracy. And it's really accurate. It's more accurate than what we have from the computers today.
Amazing. And that kind of leads into as well, Andy. So you were talking about trying to get people to invest based on ecosystem services and stuff, and bees and biodiversity are sort of part of that. So how, as quite a large company, are you guys doing that? How are you using any sort of technology or data to show things like that, you can increase biodiversity by having bees, or is anything along those?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on the interventions for a number of years now, and working with our farmers and land managers. The data side and insight side is much more difficult. So, for example, if you looked at our dairy farmers, we work with a number of different delivery partners, and we said to our farmers, okay, it's up to you if you want to engage in the scheme, but also recognising that all your farms are different, it's also up to you to determine which interventions are best. So they have a list of interventions, and then the advisors will help work with them and identify what the hotspots are, where the opportunities are, and then go through that list of interventions to say which ones are most appropriate. And we've been working with a number of academic partners to help really kind of build up that understanding in terms of what is the subsequent impact of those interventions. And although there's loads of data out there, it's very one-dimensional. So everybody's looked at a particular intervention in terms of water quality or in terms of organic soil content. The reality is all of those interventions have multifunctional outcomes, and being able to actually aggregate those, scale those up and understand what the overall impact is really challenging. So we know, and we've seen very clearly with our farmers, that actually biodiversity and habitat is probably the first area that grabs them. So prior to running this programme, we had about 11% of our dairy farmers were on some form of stewardship scheme. We offered up the opportunities. Most of them jumped at the habitat and biodiversity-based ones first. And we ended up, after the first year, with every single one of our farmers actually delivering interventions on farm because they could start to see the real traction, the real impact that it would have. The key thing now is, as we shift from interventions to outcomes, because clearly that's where organisations are going to want to invest, they're going to want to invest in a range of outcomes, that's where it becomes much more challenging. So we're in the process of starting to build the models around those data sets, but really we need much more support from a range of other organisations to build that up and use the existing data that's out there as well to produce a model that any farmer can rely on. One of the big challenges is with all the farmers we have in the UK, let alone globally, it's really difficult to support every single one of them. So having effective tools that help enable them and advise them in terms of which interventions could have the biggest impact is going to be really, really important.
Amazing. And have any of you found in sort of your separate fields any technologies that have been really, really useful, but also any technologies that have sort of passed by the wayside or have been a bit sort of fancy and not really come to anything? And the kind of question comes from, so my background is in synthetic meat, synthetic biology, and it is very, very hyped, and yeah, the actual technology behind it was quite interesting, and I'm not sure if I believe it so much anymore, sort of thing. But have you found anything like that within your separate fields, anything that's been promoted and actually worked really well as part of what you do, or anything that's just been a bit fancy and not really helped anyone?
Who wants to go first? So one of the things we developed, which actually, when most people in this audience think about farming, we're pretty educated. One of the things I didn't realise was we work with smallholders in Africa, is most villages will only have one mobile phone for every farmer in the village, and they use it to check grain price. We've developed a chat bot and a conversational AI that allows them to discuss with other people more experienced about pollination. So they can look at, so we've got the ability now to literally take a picture of their plantage, how they've planted their fields, and actually work out the probability of how diverse it is for pollination. That's been a really useful tool, which again, I thought, wow, it's pretty good. I mean, but most beekeepers know their stuff, but actually a person who's not a primary beekeeper won't know what they do, so this really helps them. One bit that we did find that was, I don't want to say pointless, nothing's pointless because everything you experiment and learn, is you can't do it just with machine. So when we did the needle in the haystack, we found lots of A's, we found lots of B's. I'm using that as an example, don't worry, there's not B's in haystacks. We had to have the expert, and we worked closely with Reading University and the Well-Be Project to say that's a needle and that's hay. Okay, which one's important? Because, of course, the technology is very quick at processing stuff, but on its own, it can't do it. So it needs the human as well. So human plus technology is the answer, not technology.
Yes, definitely. I would say from our perspective, the whole industry, it's still very nascent that technology is coming into the market. I would say they're really all unproven. We are going to see a lot of change happening over the next 10 years. And really, arguably, agriculture is the last analogue industry. So, this change is all on the cusp of happening. And as the Secretary of State has been talking about in many of his recent speeches, we're on the cusp of a fourth industrial revolution. This is what the industrial strategy is all about, and the change that they're trying to drive. So I think we can expect to see a lot of change coming along the line. It's not just about robotics and artificial intelligence. It's also about blockchain and drones and autonomous vehicles. We're going to see a lot of change happening very quickly on farm.
Yes, similarly, I think if you look at the kind of technologies that are having a real impact and will have a real impact, it is very much the enabling ones. In a raft of communities globally, they struggle to afford the kind of physical technology that perhaps would make a real difference. So I think if we have the enabling technology first, that helps identify where the hotspots are, and therefore where we can put the physical technology in place to help deliver the biggest impact.
And I suppose that kind of touches upon the worry of some people that artificial intelligence technology will take over jobs. I don't know if any of you have come across that, or have anyone...
It's always the first question we're asked is like, are the robots going to steal our jobs? And the answer from our perspective in arable farming is no. That change already happened when we moved to tractors. We're actually looking at changing the way we farm. So moving to farming each plant individually just cannot happen with a tractor. They are built for speed and not precision. So it's just going to change the role of the farmer, not take it away.
I suppose, I'm a technologist, so my job is explaining AI won't take away jobs. It would be for me to say it won't take away jobs is incorrect. What it will do is, the one skill a human has that machines doesn't have is the ability to be creative. And actually, one of the things that I tell people is, it just means your industrial mind, that you're educated at school, which is you do these degrees to get this exam, to get this job. The jobs that we do in the future will not exist today because we're going to create those jobs. But it's going to be the creative side. Is the one thing that machines will give you is the ability to scale quickly, and also a cost barrier that means that you don't have to invest megabucks. If you look at what's happened with our industry impacted by this thing called cloud, if I'd have gone back 20 years ago, for me to start up a company, I'd have had probably north of $5 million worth, 4.5 million pounds. Sorry, I work for an American company, so I only talk dollar. 4.5 million pounds or so to get going. Now, I could just go on the web using my credit card and I could get a company going in a minute of days. That's because of this emerging technology. And farming will have the same positive impact, I'm sure, where you'll see more boutique type elements coming out in farming, and there'll be an opportunity for a lot more people. But I'm not a farmer, so you guys probably are the experts in this.
Yeah, and I think for me, it'll just be that jobs are different. There's a massive amount of work to be done in our natural landscapes as a whole. So there'll clearly be a role for farmers going forwards, but there'll be a whole raft of roles in terms of landscape management and helping to enhance and regenerate our natural assets. So I think the opportunities are massive.
And still on the jobs thing, it was brought to my attention that some of the older generation who have trained doing jobs that no longer exist, and then the rapid way that we're changing in society, and technology obviously being part of that, is that we're constantly having to retrain for these new jobs. And so again, what do you think of, like, if you've trained as a carpenter, or if you train, something, that's a really bad example, but you know what I mean, of this retraining of, like, do you think that technological jobs will become more complex and maybe some of the simpler jobs we do won't be there? So how do we then train people that maybe would be more set for the simpler or manual jobs that may be taken away?
So again, in most of if you look at technology where most of this innovation starts with and then it works out into every industry, what typically happens is the first thing we've got to understand as society going forward, we've got to be flexible and agile. The reason why is you miss as many opportunities as the ones that get taken away. Also, what you'll find is there's two types of, if it is technically ability to be repeatable, then a machine will do it. Yeah, if it can be done repeatable. So you're going to find that people's skill in the future will be one where it's either boutique in what you're trying to do, and if you look in, smallhold farmers, a lot of it's boutique. They just wouldn't be able to scale some of this. Or you've got to be the creator of the next industrialized scaling product. If you want to go out there and do something that's repetitive every day the same, I would advise you to start getting your creative head on, because those jobs will be machine enabled. And there's good reasons why as well. One is, if you're doing food source, we've got the ability now with scientists to work out unique hives, honey. Every hive in every hive is actually like DNA'd. No honey from any hive is the same. So we can already start working out the source of food, and that's important for the future. So these are the type of things that can enable technology, enable us to do, and also scale it, where the human has to start creating the different skills. But that's just the life we're in. If you go back 100 years and we sat in the same audience, other than you'd be dressed very differently, we wouldn't have mics on, and we certainly wouldn't be talking AI. We would all be pretty much doing industrial manufacturing jobs, etc. The job I started off with is not the job I do today. And probably all of us have changed our career at least once. And I urge everybody to do that. It's experiment and learn.
And is there anything technology-wise, maybe outside your field that you're excited about, or something that you guys might move into, or anything along those lines?
Go on. Have a go.
Technology's so broad as well, isn't it? It's like it can be anything from, like you said, agriculture, precision agriculture, to... I saw something interesting in the Nestle, when looking through my Nestle kind of leaflet, that you're using more for precision nutrition, about you personalising it for a person.
Absolutely, and I think that's a real opportunity for the future. You know, obviously, as time progresses, our needs change, and obviously, with an ageing workforce, an ageing group of citizens, we need to find the best way of supporting people. So, the ability to do that is going to be really, really important in the future, and clearly technology can play a key role in that. And again, when we talk about sustainable food systems, then nutrition and precision nutrition are crucial. You know, we're looking into the challenge at the moment of trying to find somewhere in the region of another 60 to 70% food calories by 2050 to feed the world, with the change in expectations in living standards and growing population. There are a number of ways in which we can help manage that, in terms of helping to manage food waste, in terms of sustainable agriculture, but clearly nutrition and precision nutrition is going to play a key role as well.
I think when you look at autonomous robots in the environment, there are a lot of applications beyond farming. So one of the initiatives we're looking at is developing the blueprint for human-robotic interaction. So this is something, I mean, we've got, at the one end, we've got robots in factories, never see a human, really don't interact with them at all. At the other end, we've got, say, care robots, and that is their job. That's what they do. We're, in a way, creating a new area of robotics where they're in the environment, they need to interact with humans. Our robots will encounter ramblers, dogs, badgers, but they don't necessarily want to in order to do their job. So it will be the same in retail, hospitality. There are going to be other areas where there are robots trying to do their job that need to encounter humans. So we need to have a blueprint to define those interactions, to make sure that they're positive interactions, and that will be one thing that we're going to be developing, so watch this space.
I was going to say that's really interesting because, if a human interacts with a robot and it ends up in a fist fight, like who is liable for that? You know?
Particularly when the robot's armed with lasers,
yeah. So those poor badgers.
You have 20 seconds to comply, yes.
And then, so again, we've touched on sustainability, which is a really interesting topic, super close to my heart. And I would love to understand, like, what does sustainability mean for each of you? Because we've talked about using technology to enable sustainability, but sustainability is that sort of fluffy white cloud word that we sort of put on the end of anything to make it sound nice, with ethical and green. So it'd be great to see what it means to you, which I suppose is applicable to why you all sort of do your jobs.
So last week I attended a conference called Global Sec in Bratislava. And when I went there, I was told the conference called Global Sec. So I'm thinking, well, it's going to be security, IT. I can get geeked out on my cyber security. And then I realised that actually nearly 3/4 of the stuff was about sustainability, because what it is about global security. It's about security for the future, because there's more humans now than ever before, and there's not getting any less. We need more food than we've ever had before. And I think the bit that I want to get to is where we understand our own personal impact on that. And either a positive or a negative. And it would be great to, in the future, to understand, in any business, to make a substantial change in a large scale, you only have to do a 1 degree change. You don't have to do a 99% change. Like if you want to lose, you do this at Christmas, like me, well, I do this all the time. I'm going to tell you about me. So you go Christmas, eat too much, go, right, 1st of Jan, now I go to the gym, go and get a load of exercise, and I'll be good for the year. Then after 1 month, your gym membership, you forget about, you keep paying the direct debit because it's all good to keep paying. And then basically you don't go to the gym again. But if you knew you had a 1 degree change in your lifestyle to have a positive impact on all the elements of sustainability, that would have a massive difference globally. And I would always look for the 1% change rather than a 99% change.
I guess our mission is sustainable farming, right? So it's got that buzzword right in there. You're absolutely right. It means different things to different people. I think fundamentally for us, it's that it's cheesily, but very, very seriously and importantly, feeding the world without costing the earth. I mean, the challenge of feeding 9 billion people by 2050 sustainably is, it's possibly one of the most important challenges, apart from climate change, facing us as a species at the moment. So, if we can manage to do that, then I'll be happy.
Yeah, I guess for me, we're kind of taught to control the controllables, which tends to focus us on our own remit of control, which can be a real challenge, because the reality is, when you look at the scale of challenge we need to address, the only way we're going to do it is through true collaboration. And we hear a lot of people talk about collaboration, but in reality it's a pale version of that. The reality is we need to find ways of coming together to understand what those core challenges are and how we can really work together to make a difference. And if we get the shared interest proposition right, our ability to deliver the kind of change we need without dramatically having to change individual elements of it should be really substantive.
I suppose that's also difficult because you both I suppose you two work for sort of very large companies and you work for quite a small company sort of thing. So changing the 1% or the 99% sort of is it's a weird choice to have to make sort of thing. And I think that a lot of us sort of flip-flop between two. But I was wondering, in terms of using technology in small and large data. It was kind of touched upon earlier. And I don't know if anyone can really explain smaller. I struggle with this, but we kind of talk about small and large data quite a lot. And I don't know if anyone could explain it a bit more and maybe how your companies or yourself are involved in each. Because I would assume that you're involved in Sarra and more small data capture. And maybe
there is a big data element as well. I mean, if you're looking at the sum of UK farming and then indeed global farming beyond that as a whole, there is going to be aggregated data that will be very important. So for example, in yield predictions and that kind of thing, there's definitely, you were asking earlier what happened about the data and I forgot to address it, but yes, there is a market for that data and it will be very valuable.
I suppose small and large data, I think these days everything's large. I think small is, if you look at it again, we capture off a hive about 1 million rows per day of data. And because we're doing sensor rate and you'll be doing the same with robots, you'll be doing millions of days. The key bit here is what you do with the data, because it's very, very simple to capture a lot of stuff and not be relevant. And it's knowing how you can be relevant with it. So for me, don't consider anything to be small. If you're capturing, by the way, there is some things where small is good. So we just done, it was a bit of, my AI guys did a bit of fun of creating music from artificial intelligence. We took all the Eurovision songs, 300 songs, loaded them into an AI algorithm and created a tune from it. You can go on YouTube and see it, it's quite, and the lyrics were done. What we found with music, actually the small amount of data is critical because everybody starts at different keys, starts with different melodies. Having lots of data, we threw every bit of data we could at it. And we came up with something no human could ever understand was music. And then what we did is we started then taking away some of the data and giving it sets of data to teach it. So if you can think of it, it's like teaching the model, go left, go right, go left, go right. And that then created the music that we put on YouTube. No human hand was involved in it. That's where lots of data was bad. So that's the only example I've got today where lots of data is bad, but majority of the day, more data the merrier.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's more about how it's presented. So I think you're right, a stack of data out there and it's needed generally. But farmers are incredibly busy, have a lot to do, and they need information at their fingertips in a way which is really straightforward to transact. So finding ways in which we can interpret that data and present it in a way that's useful for them is crucial.
And I think we're almost coming to an end, but I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add about anything that you guys are doing or that I've missed, which is likely. No, I think we're good then. Thank you so much.